Hey, good Saturday afternoon, everybody. Brian Bledsoe with you here, host of the Desert Farmer Podcast. So good to be with you once again. I hope you are doing well. We actually had a storm system deliver some rain to parts of the west and southern high plains over the past 24 hours or so. And that's what I want to focus on first of all this afternoon is what has actually gone on for the past 24 hours. This is pulled information from the CocoRoss website. I know a lot of you do participate in it. It's such an excellent way to paint who's seen what over a period of time. If you're interested in checking out the site, please do so. Just simply Google that Coco Ross. You'll see all about it and go to their website and check it out. It's been fantastic. And with this storm system, one of the areas that I had a big old question mark on yesterday was what was going to happen across parts of east and southeast Colorado and in northwest Kansas. Well, I'm happy to say that many of you overperformed as far as moisture was concerned out of this deal. Folks in Goodland picked up about an inch of rain out of this. Colby picked up around 8/10 of an inch. Back here toward Burlington, you got about 4/10 of an inch. Down here toward Arapahoe, Cheyenne Wells, Eads, back toward La Junta, Rocky Ford, anywhere from a half an inch to up to 3/4 of an inch. Even down here around, Sharon Springs, we did okay with about a half inch to around 6/10 of an inch. And then areas farther east did okay too, around Dodge City, also down here, certainly around Hutchinson, Wichita, up around Topeka, and then across southeast Kansas and into southwest Missouri did okay too. But the southwest part of Kansas really wasn't supposed to get much out of this deal. You really didn't get much. Same thing in the Oklahoma and most of the Texas Panhandle. Because if we look down here into the Texas Panhandle, this is courtesy of the West Texas Mesonet. Uh, you could see that yesterday I was really thinking this was the line that was going to demark heavier rain to the east and drier stuff to the northwest. Well, fortunately, folks in Lubbock picked up about an inch of rain. Pretty heavy thunderstorm moved through that community, last afternoon and evening. And areas just either side of that line obviously did okay. But if you went northwest of that line, you can see the differences here in terms of rainfall. But back to the northwest, Clovis didn't see much of anything. Muleshoe, Dimmitt, Freona, Hereford, up toward Amarillo, Dalhart, nothing. Maybe Booker up in the northeast panhandle, I think picked up around a quarter of an inch. Down here, La Mesa, Texas picked up about an inch and a half. So there were definitely haves and have nots on either side of that line. And certainly the better rainfall fell to the east of that line. The farther east you went across Texas and into southern portions of Oklahoma. So kudos to you if you scored some rain. Obviously, we're going to need something, though, because this area here that I'm highlighting are going to see a lot of strong southwest wind by the time we head in toward Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesday is going to be the worst day by far across the region with some wind gusts in excess of 50 to 60 miles per hour. So sad that they didn't get anything out of this deal. Glad that those that got it, but we certainly need a lot more. Let's see if there's going to be any more of this going on over the next couple of weeks. And this starts out tomorrow morning. This is what our upper level weather pattern is going to look like. We've got upper level low pressure here tomorrow morning. We've got strong upper level high pressure here south of the Aleutians. Here's our storm system that just cruised through. It'll be over the lower Mississippi Valley. And we've got a ridge axis here behind that storm system, providing warmth and dryness here ahead of that next wave. But if we put this into motion, a couple of things that I want you to notice is what happens with this relationship between this high and this low. I want you to watch those two pretty closely because what happens with that low is it really never cycles through with all of its energy. It will likely send bits and pieces out of the middle part of the country, but there's nothing big and consolidated about the energy that makes its way eastward out of that main trough. It just kind of sits there, spins, and kind of retrogrades back to the west a little bit. And that's kind of what this high does. It actually retrogrades back here over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And another piece of that high kind of breaks free down here off the coast of California and eventually will kind of influence that area from Southern California across the Southern Plains by the end of February. So, as far as a wet signal is concerned in the middle part of the country, this is not that. We would much rather see something come out, at least in more organized pieces, a little bit farther south than what this pattern is likely going to end up being. So, when we break this down, in the precipitation anomalies first, we're going to break this down into 7-day increments. So this will be from the 15th through the 22nd. Obviously, there's your main precipitation anomalies on the negative side, but I still don't think we're going to see really anything through this corridor either. All right. You are definitely wetter here and through this sector here. All right. good news out west because they definitely need it because really about the past month and a half has been a big nothing burger out here in parts of the Intermountain West. Colorado mountains are awful, and you're going to see a little bit of an uptick here, which is certainly some good news. If we look at the 7-day period beyond that, this goes from the 22nd through March 1st. You can see that those dry anomalies do shrink, all right, but we're still seeing them kind of sporadically here in that sector. We are wetter in this area here and wetter here through here. And obviously in the eastern Corn Belt, we need some water. And I think you're going to start to get that a little bit. And I'll show you why that's important coming up here in just a little bit. The temperature profile here, the anomalies from the 15th through the 22nd, still a blowtorch here in the middle part of the country. All right. But there are some cool anomalies starting to show up here in Western Canada. But watch what happens with this anomaly here as we go to the 7-day period beyond that. It doesn't move a whole lot. The core of them stay back here to the west. We start to see a little bit come down here into Montana and into parts of the northern plains, but we really only thing we do is just kind of chop back those really high-end temperature anomalies that we've been witnessing, and they kind of refocus themselves down here over southwest Kansas, southeast Colorado, eastern New Mexico, western Oklahoma, and a good part of Texas. Even then, those anomalies just aren't as high-end as what they've been. So is the pattern going to be a little bit cooler in that 7-day period? Perhaps, but especially the farther west and northwest you go, that's where the more wintry, if you will, pattern is going to be taking place. Certainly for not areas farther east and southeast. All right, put a bow on that 2-week deal. Let's see what's going on with our La Nina to El Nino transition here. This is a sea surface temperature anomaly animation from the 15th of January to current. All right, and a couple of things that you really want to watch here. Watch the cold pool, where it starts here, and what it ends up being. I also want you to watch this sector here and also up here in the Gulf of Alaska with what's going on. And what you're seeing here is warming on all of the fronts right there. And we are keeping temperatures, sea surface temperatures, warmer than average here, off the west coast of North America, off the Baja. Certainly a lot of warming out here, all right? The Indian Ocean continues to warm up, all right? So there's more warming taking place here on a large scale than cooling. And this is where we are today, all right? Basically just circle those areas. The thing that really sticks out to me is the warmth that exists in this area. From the Gulf of Alaska, down the west coast of North America, off the Baja, out here toward Hawaii. We also have substantial warmth setting up here, right off the west coast of South America. We've got a ton of warm water out here. Same here. And the thing that's been going on here with La Nina, and I've talked about this at length, whenever we have, and I'm going to erase those, whenever we have easterly trade winds like this, what that does is that allows upwelling to occur and cooler water from beneath the surface to upwell to the surface. And that's what basically helps to facilitate not only La Nina maintenance, but development. All right. Once we get a big westerly wind burst, it's going to take all of this warmer than average water, or at least a good chunk of it, and send it east. And that will help to facilitate El Nino development, maintenance, and likely strengthening, at least right here in the center part. We're already on our way out here off the west coast of South America. And it's not just about what's going on at the surface. It's also about what's going on beneath the surface. This animation starts back in early December and wraps up here in early February, all right? But initially, did you see all that cooler than average water that was in that sector? As we got deeper into this animation, the warmer than average water, all right, that is over here, okay, I'm labeling this to say Indonesia, and this is South America off the west coast. All that does is undercut the cold pool. So even if we were to get easterly trade winds to reappear, there's no cold water beneath the surface. You would actually be upwelling warmer than average water because that's where that pool is right now. And this is the easiest visualization in my mind to show you the handoff from what was a La Nina episode to neutrality, which is probably going to be pretty brief, to El Nino development and maintenance, because that warm pool, that warmth goes all the way down to at least 200 meters, and in some cases over here in Indonesia, all the way down to 300 meters deep. Real impressive. And the core of that warm pool that's right there is right there situated between about 100 and 200 meters deep. It is pretty substantial. All right. The latest Copernicus 3 modeling system came out. These are the foreign models with the exception of ENSO, which is the United States. The main ones that I focus on, the ECMWF out of Europe, the Euro, if you will, or the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia. And all of these lines are different members of the model looking at the same thing. This is the forecast for the sea surface temperature anomaly plume out there in the central equatorial Pacific. High end, super El Nino. Low end, member, down here still hanging south of zero, which would be technically borderline La Nina. We're not going to be down here. Even if we were to just take the mean of all of those members, it still puts us there at least a degree Celsius above average by July, and maybe even a little bit higher than that. All right. Probably in that ballpark, just the mean. But I'm not focused on necessarily out here around July. I'm really interested in what happens here in May. So if we put May on here, there it is. Okay. You see where the mean of those sea surface temperature anomalies are going. They're almost, well, they're certainly above, positive zero point 0.5. A lot of them are up here around maybe 0.75 degrees Celsius above average and impinging on the one. So it's the transition that's going to take place from right now to May that in many cases I think is going to fuel what ends up happening, during the heart of the spring and at least into early summer, because it is that transition that takes place with those sea surface temperature anomalies in conjunction with the seasonal change that invigorates the subtropical jet stream. And when we have an active subtropical or southern branch of the jet stream, a lot of times there in the western and southern and central plains, we don't have to worry too much about moisture. The atmosphere turns on like a switch. We've seen this happen in previous years. I will show that to you in just a second, but that's what I'm really focused on. And once we get El Nino going, you can see here that there are a lot of members that take it up here into strong territory by the time we head into summer. So I think it's important to look at these past analog years when we did this transition, all right, from La Nina to El Nino. I know I've done that with you before, but the Climate Prediction Center here recently changed what they consider criteria for a 3-month La Nina or El Nino mean. It's called the Relative Oceanic Niño Index. All right. The old version, okay, which, is, I guess, being considered outdated. All right. They felt the need to replace that because the Relative Oceanic Niño Index basically takes what those sea surface temperature anomalies are right now and then subtracts the difference there from the surrounding tropical sea surface temperature anomalies. So basically, if the ocean is warm and the ENSO region is warm, all right, if the ENSO region is warmer than the surrounding ocean, well, then that's your Nino 3.4 index, and vice versa as far as being cool. All right. So what the thing that I noticed the most in terms of the relative oceanic Nino index is that it made the cooler values cooler, relatively speaking. All right. And you'll see some of that show up. But what we're doing for this exercise here is just simply looking at these years where we went from technically La Nina or borderline La Nina transitioning to El Nino. And you'll see some of those show up here. In the 50s, 1951, and right here in 1957. Now, the big thing with 51 is that we were right there at negative 0.5, right there at La Nina criteria. And we went to El Nino criteria by March, April, May, and continued that throughout the remainder of the year. 1957, we were almost right there around neutral. The previous Oceanic Nino Index, actually had us borderline La Nina. So we warmed that up just a little bit right there. And you can see what we did. We went to El Nino by February, March, and April with this index and actually finished with strong El Nino criteria by the end of the year. So we've got 51 and 57 that we're looking at. What about the 60s? Well, 1963 is in there, right there, weak La Nina, if you will. And we went to El Nino by June, July, August. 1965, you could technically put it in there too. Weakly cool to El Nino by April, May, June. I think that's valid to put it in there. 1968, kind of the same story. All right. We were El Nino by May, June, July there. What about the 70s? 1972. Yep. Weekly cool. El Nino by March, April, May, and we continued even strong El Nino by later that year. What about other years in here? Oh, what about 1976? Look at that. We were La Nina, El Nino by June, July, August. So a little later, took a little later for us to achieve that. Okay. But I think we have to put 76 in there. What about the 80s? Nope, I don't think 82 is in there. We weren't La Nina, all right? And the 80s were a little different breed. But if we look beyond that, what about 1986? Weekly cool, El Nino by July, August, September. Again, a later arrival. But once it got there, it definitely stayed. Okay. Excuse me. 90s, let's look at that. The 90s were basically weekly warm the whole time and had some strong El Nino events in there. But the one that sticks out here is 1997, where we were weekly cool, made it to technically El Nino criteria by March, April, May, and then super El Nino thereafter, later that year. What about recent years? Let's go in the 2000s. Could O2 be in there? I don't think so. I don't think O2 is going to be in there. All right. So we're leaving O2 out for right now. 2006, we were there, but look, we didn't achieve El Nino status until August, September, October. We are definitely going to achieve that before then, in my opinion now. 09, again, La Nina probably held on too long. All right. But we're just simply looking at the transition, all right, that we did there. So we're putting 09 in there, at least for the time being. What about in the 20 teens? 2014, never made it to El Nino by this metric. Okay, weekly warm by late there in the year, but for most of 2014, we were just stuck in neutral. All right, right there around neutral. 2015 had an El Nino transition, but there was no La Nina before it. We have to come down here to 2018. 2018, we had La Nina to start and El Nino to finish, but we didn't get there until September, October, November. So you can see we actually held on to La Nina criteria into March, April, May. We are not doing that this year, but I'm focused on the transition. And I will pair some of these analogs. I will throw some of those out as we get later on when we see what's going on. But for this exercise, this is just what we're doing. And then here recently, the last one was 2023. All right. And if you look at where we are right now, the November, December, January RONI was at a -1. All right. For December, January, February, we're probably still going to be in the same ballpark. So for this exercise, look, we didn't technically achieve El Nino status until June, July, August. But I'll tell you what, we saw a very sharp transition that took place here. Okay. And in the previous version of the Oceanic Niña Index, we achieved El Nino status before this one. So that's what I'm saying. It hangs on to the cool a little longer versus what the old metric used. But I think 2023 is a very good analog based on where we're going. I just think we're probably going to achieve El Nino status before some of this is. So let's look at some of the potential precipitation anomaly analogs, just April through June with this. All right. When we put all those years in there, April to June, and I have more in here than what I did last time, and it has a little bit of an impact, as you'll see. April to June, what we did here is really get active in this quadrant. Okay. All of this area got active. We got active in the southeast and Florida as well. All right. But especially in the western high plains. That's where we really lit things up. Farther east, notice the dry anomaly signal that's here in the Corn Belt. All right. Now, in the modeling that I've shared with you, there is nothing big, awful, and scary in the Corn Belt about drought and dryness. But when you look at all these years lumped together, you get a dry signal, certainly on the front end of this. All right. From April to June. Doesn't mean it's completely dry. No. There will be storms come through, but certainly it's wetter the farther west you go. And a lot of times with the way the atmosphere is configured, we bring dry air in like this that really hinders things here across the Corn Belt. But from a modeling standpoint, computer modeling standpoint, it is showing the exact opposite. It's actually showing wetter than average conditions here in the Corn Belt. So this is something we're going to have to really watch, that the modeling is somewhat contradictory to what the analogs show, at least for the Corn Belt. What about June to August? Well, the dry signal really relaxes here across parts of the Corn Belt. There's still a little bit of it there, but it relaxes. And the last two transition years here, 2018 and 23, in the Corn Belt, we were dry up front, but we never got hot. All right. We never really got hot in those years. And then when the rains came in August, it saved the day. So even though this dry signal is still present, okay, it relaxed quite a bit. But the thing that I took away from it is how wet these years were in these same areas, the farther west you go, okay, from West Texas all the way up to Western High Plains here. And Texas was wet early, but really dried out late. Risk of some flash summer drought across the eastern two-thirds of Texas, I think that's on the table, at least from a historical standpoint. Again, the modeling isn't really there yet. Right? There are some hints in the modeling that show that, but the analogs really show that the eastern two-thirds of Texas ends up being wet up front and then dry on the back in the June to August timeframe. We really dry things out down here along the Gulf Coast and into parts of the Appalachians. But it kind of owes to what I was saying, that the farther west you go, you really don't have much to worry about in terms of a big, awful, nasty dry signal with these analogs in here. And are all of these analogs going to be good? All right. No, they're not. This is really early. And so once we figure out what this transition looks like in more detail, we can start lopping off some of these years. I think some of the years, all right, that we're going to lop off are basically going to be those late transition years, those years where we don't achieve El Nino until later on. Because once we get past, say, February and we see that March run of those models, that's when they really start to pin things down a bit more effectively. And that's when we can kind of lop off some of those analog years, at least in my opinion. And I don't pretend to be the smartest meteorologist or climatologist in the world with this stuff. I'm just telling you what I see right now going forward. I say this all the time to especially agricultural interests. If there's anything that I can do for you on a daily basis, I work for a lot of folks in this capacity in the ag sector across the Great Plains. And if there's something I can do for you, please put my contact information to use. I can give you a bunch of references from actual producers that you can talk to and see what my product is all about. But if you are not interested, you can still frequent some of this information right here. I greatly appreciate your listenership with the Desert Farmer Podcast. If you're interested in advertising with me here on the Desert Farmer Podcast, hit me up. We can do that too. But it's always a pleasure to talk to you, share this kind of information with you. If you've got questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. But if you don't, I will be chatting with you again here real soon. Have yourself a great rest of your weekend. A happy Valentine's Day. And again, thanks for listening to the Desert Farmer Podcast. Take care.